Welcome back to Breaking Strings. Our guest today is Matt Bacon. He's an American classical guitarist and composer, currently the head of guitar faculty at KM Conservatory of Music, located in Chennai. That is on the Bay of Bengal in eastern India. So that is a very far journey from where he originally started in San Francisco, California. You can find Matt on Instagram as Matt Bacon Music. Thanks so much for coming on, man. It's going to be a pleasure. I've asked you some questions about India before, but I never got into the details of why'd you actually move there?
Yeah, so the reason I moved here ended up being a little bit luck because at the time I was just kind of blasting out resumes, blasting out my profile after doing a lot of gigging in San Francisco, to the point that I started thinking, okay, maybe I should do some teaching, maybe I should get, as normal of a job as we can get as musicians. And then obviously the most normal choice was to move to India to do that.
Yeah.
But basically, I was sent a contract after an interview, and it was just like a normal Skype call, but halfway through, like I started kind of piecing it together. I didn't quite know what I was getting myself into because I was thinking like, okay, this must be that Slumdog Millionaire School of Music. Like I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about Chennai. And, but a day or two went by and they sent me a contract saying like, okay, well, we'd really love to have you. Just take 2 weeks to think it over. And the way that I know how to describe it is like, I know when you're growing up, like everyone has some friend or someone like in their class that's like, oh, we went to Paris for vacation. Everyone needs to go to Paris. I just love Paris so much. Or some like really romanticized some city like that. And I've traveled a lot, but I've never really had that experience. And getting off the airplane in Chennai with like all the chaos and like rickshaws going around and stuff everywhere, I got that feeling there of all places. So from the very first day, from getting off the airplane, there's just like a really friendly and open vibe to the city, that it just had a really good vibe, a good feeling there. And so a year became like, I guess I'm on my 8th year, going on 9 years now. Just kind of flew by. And but the intention was, okay, we'll go over for a year. We'll start doing some classical guitar stuff here, and see how it goes. So that was kind of how I ended up here. And then just time piled on, and I, really enjoy it. And it's been a bit of an adventure.
San Francisco, even as an independent contractor and, working for yourself and getting all these gigs, it's a comfortable area. It's one of the more comfortable areas in the world, and definitely among the more comfortable areas in America as far as the fees and stuff that you can rack up as a performer. You have to have a certain amount of bravery to just automatically switch countries and leave a comfortable area like that and start something completely new and start from zero in a way. I mean, you're offered this position.
Yeah, I guess.
But you don't exactly know what kind of a lifestyle you're going to expect and things like that. I mean, is this something that you decided quickly? It was just something like instinctual. You felt like it was the right thing to do, or you just wanted something new? Do you want something, I don't know, felt a little bit more romantic than what you were used to in San Francisco?
Man, that's really funny because all of the things you just said and asked, which are totally reasonable, never even entered my mind. So I actually
I love it.
I guess it's easier to make those kind of decisions, I guess, when you're like 26 or whatever, when I moved over.
Yeah.
But I remember my main concern at the time was being like, if I keep playing these same concerts and weddings and corporate events and stuff I was doing, which like I really enjoyed doing. I was doing it great for a couple years there. But it felt like, okay, so that's a gig every 3 days. And I remember being more concerned that I'm going to just be playing like the same Albanese, like Barrios pieces and being like, I want some time to teach. I want some time, to practice new things or learn, and being more just about like, starting teaching a bit more formally. Not that I wasn't teaching like independent students and things like that before teaching, when we were at Peabody. But those kind of normal questions of what do you think when you move across the world, or It never even occurred to me. Like it's actually I feel really naive when I think about it now that like nothing the difference in cuisine or stuff like I meet some people here from Europe or occasionally someone from the US and they'll have a lot of questions like that or where should we eat or what do you have to think about ice in the water or stuff like that. None of that stuff has ever crossed my mind actually. So I just kind of showed up and it just kind of, took off.
That's wonderful. I mean, if you could give advice to somebody who's in a similar position where they're being offered something new, but at the same time, they're in a place that's very, very comfortable. It's a place that they're used to. I think that you would say, go ahead, make the jump. Just try it out and take the risk. Is that right?
I would. What I tell my students now, because like I have a few that that I've prepared and that are going to go to conservatory in Europe or go to conservatory abroad now to finish their studies. I tell them to do it, but I said have a 2 year plan, have a 3 year plan. What would you do if you come back to India? What would you do if you say stay in Germany or stay? I have a student going to Austria in a few months. Um, you know, so you have to make a plan, and in the back of that plan you've got to understand that at the end of the day, there's good musicians in every corner of the globe. You have to really think about what you can bring to the experience or bring to the place that you're going, and at the same time, you know, it's a little hypocritical of me because I'm saying like think of these plans or think of this that, and I managed to not really do very much of that. But looking back, that's the advice I would give: is have a 2 year plan, have a 3 year plan. And that's like in regards to where you want to be with your playing, professionally, whether that's gigging, whether that's teaching, lifestyle wise, so that you don't burn yourself out, I would say. And like as a musician nowadays, we have to wear like a million different hats. Like you're doing podcast. I think you were just doing a recording with Yuri in Canada or something, right?
Yep.
So you got a recording you're working on. I'm sure you've got students over in Germany and stuff like that. Like we all have 3 or 4 music adjacent things that we do. And it's easy to feel like because we got into it as a passion, it's easy to feel like 100% of our time has to be dedicated to it. So I would say you have to balance it with your overall lifestyle and well-being, and then go from there. And then if it seems worth the risk, I would say, more often than not, it ends up being worth the risk.
Let's talk about the scene, classical guitar scene in India. What's going to be the role of the classical guitar kind of in the Indian music landscape as a whole? Because I know a little bit about Hindustani classical, that is Indian classical music, and then you're coming in as a classically trained guitarist. Were there already, musicians that were building a classical guitar repertoire in the school and were quite successful at it when you arrived?
In the school where I'm at, I'm the first guitar teacher. So like when I got there, they had just moved to a new facility. I think I started with like 4 students. Now I've got something like 25. So I was the first in that regard, but there's other schools that had been doing a lot with guitar. Like there's a really, really good classical guitar community here. Calcutta Guitar Festival. There's Delhi School of Music. Actually, in 2015, when I first got here, I was playing at that festival in Calcutta, and there's like a multi-city tour for it. And it's a great festival. It's really, really fun, and it's like a totally normal guitar festival you would see anywhere else. I mean, one of the years they had David Russell, and you know what I mean, like the name brand players you expect to see kind of bouncing around.
Got it.
Europe and the US will make a stop by here. And a lot of the different embassies and stuff are really supportive, at least more in North India. I'm in the South, so we've been kind of doing stuff from the ground up here. But to kind of give you a Cliff Notes version, the coolest thing is that in general, not just musicians, not just students, Indian audiences are really open to it, like a huge variety of music. There's not this thing where you go and you play a recital and you look out in the church or you look out in the hall and it's all gray hair. There's definitely not that here. Like there's a really youthful audience that'll go see an indie band, go see a guitar recital, go to a workshop, go to a Hindustani concert, Carnatic concert, you know, all with the same level of enthusiasm. And that's probably my favorite thing about being here. In terms of the guitar nerd kind of stuff that people kind of more by the book would care about, yeah, I've arranged some raga based music for guitar that got published by Mel Bay a few years ago with some guitar etudes in that. I gave the Indian premiere of the Aranwes at our school, at least as
Fantastic.
far as I know. I'm currently, I say currently working on a concerto, but we performed I'd say the first half of it this year in March here in a big orchestra concert with players from Scotland and teaming up with some players from India. And again, the average age of the audience for that is probably like 30, 35. A lot of people with their kids, 2,000, 3,000 seat hall. So we at the school and in terms of the guitar are really creating, uh, a rewarding or fulfilling musical culture. And there's a lot of creativity here. But at the same time, we have to kind of understand that we're the generation that's going to be like making the venues, making the concert series, and kind of putting a lot of that infrastructure work down. Um, Counter to say like the US where like the default career would be like hit up all the conservatories and try to do a master class, then like a recital in their concert hall that's been there for like 150 years. So that infrastructure is not here. But in a way, it's more exciting because we're kind of making that and kind of proving that there's a public uh, demand for it, a public need for it, where people really, really like it. And then the other cool thing is there's just I do a lot of recording for film music, um, Bollywood films and things like that. Uh, yeah, I just had actually a really, really good session playing some pieces a couple of days ago. I have no clue how much are going to make it into the movie, but I recorded Leyenda Capicha Arabe, a lot of like classic stuff that's supposed to go into this. I can't give too much detail. It's probably not appropriate for me to yet, but they find some ways for that into a lot of programs and things here. So, and like I said, there's a lot of students, and they're all the enthusiasm level is very high. Yeah, so it's cool here. It's really fun.
So there was definitely a shift in a lot of the things that you were doing as a classical guitarist since you've moved to India that I've noticed. And correct me if I'm wrong,
For
but
sure. Yeah.
I would say you've become a composer and you've written quite a bit of
Mm.
stuff. And I think that living in Chennai has influenced your musical style a little bit. I mean, you've written the piece Masala Blues. Definitely having a masala is an Indian spice, if I'm not wrong. It's a type of Indian spice used for
Yeah.
cooking, right? So you've let the influence of your surroundings work their way into your composition, but you've also not been afraid to embrace the roots that a lot of us have, that we're sometimes taught to be. I think in a conservatory, you're sort of taught to suppress just a little bit your rock and roll
Yeah.
roots, your electric guitar roots.
Yeah, where you're that and like your inner Segovia and your inner Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've written a piece that's an homage to Jimmy Page, which
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I know that Carlo Dominiconi is also very free. He was free with his compositions in that way, that he would delve into the rock and roll style, and Ben Verdery as well. I love that freedom to be able to go into rock and roll comfortably and, quote that style and sort of not be afraid of the fact that, yeah, that is not that's not a style that is studied in the conservatory. Is not part of our
Yeah,
classical
definitely
repertoire,
not.
but it's so much a part of our larger guitar history in the 20th century into the 21st century. So it's a very, very important thing to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I would say with that piece specifically, I'm very proud to say that that was like my first formal commission, let's say. Let's say outside of the Indian Etudes book. And I knew, so I don't know if have you met Chad Ibsen or Jake Ramirez? Uh, I met them,
I met Chad. I
a
met
long
Chad in
time ago.
Boston, I think, in 2012.
Okay. Yeah. So I had met them in the US, at classical guitar festivals, the normal stuff we do. And I remember like somewhere throughout the past summer, Jake had contacted me about writing a piece and playing a piece for that festival. And so I started working on this, but then just like with the logistics of flying there and the scheduling didn't work out. So I had it in mind, like, I'm going to finish this piece. And I knew I wanted to do something like part traditional, part just like cool. It needs to be something fun for people to play on guitar. That's my main thing, is it has like, I really like to write music that at the end of the day should be fun to play and just a little bit interesting, not so interesting that it turns people off, like not too intellectual. So, and I wanted to write something that would make like a nice impact on this festival, and I knew Chad was going to play at the festival, and like me, like Chad grew up like listening to a lot of Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, like that sort of thing. So I knew he'd be like the perfect person to play the premiere, and so I knew I wanted to write this like Homenage à Jimmy Page, title of that being like an Homenage à Debussy, or you think of a lot of the pieces that are in kind of our collective classical guitar consciousness. So it takes that as a little bit of tongue in cheek, but the piece itself, I kind of weave in and out of a few separate Led Zeppelin themes, but the main thing is there's a good part of it that's just me kind of composing, some of the stuff just however I like to write in there. But then I end with kind of a reharmonization of the Zeppelin song "Thank You." So it's just kind of meant to be a musical thank you, because without Zeppelin and stuff like that, I definitely would not have gotten into guitar. Classical guitar came later for me. So I wanted to kind of put that and a bit of a world music twist on it. But if you listen to a lot of Led Zeppelin's music, there's a lot of world music and folk influence in their songs. And the piece is cool. So it's fun to play, and Chad did like an incredible job playing in the concert. It was really cool. The Masala Blues, I should get to that one then. With Masala Blues, I don't know how I title half these things. I just think, oh, that's a cool sounding title, and I just leave it at that. And it just kind of stuck. And like I have a piece called Butter Paneer, but that's just because when I was writing it, I spilled butter paneer on the sheet, like on the paper, and that's
funny.
So like a lot of people ask, like, what do you mean by this title? And some of them have like a meaning, and most of them are just like, I'm not afraid to say, I just think it sounds cool, I like it. Don't think into that more than that, or you can think into it as much as you want. And that's just kind of it's the kind of the vibe for it.
I want to ask you, because I'm trying to get a perception of whether this particular shift in your thinking happened since you moved to India, or if a lot of it is just part of your personality. Well, first, my personal opinion sometimes of, attending a formal conservatory, and I only have experience in the United States, so I'll give my own experience, and maybe you could agree. I feel like the career paths can sometimes they can keep you a little bit boxed in. It's like you have to either do this or you do this, or if you're a composer, I felt like for a certain time you have to compose almost in a certain way. Like, I'll give an example. If you compose and the writing is too neo-romantic, too tonal, too beautiful, then it's like, oh, well, that's fine.
Who
That's
wants
fine.
to hear
That's
harmony?
well, if it's like if it's too beautiful to listen to, I was always told, like, yeah, that sounds too much like film music, and it was like, and I love to write pieces that were, if I could compare it to something that is known within the classical guitar repertoire, for example, like Stanley Meyer's Cavatina. I mean, that's just like a gorgeous melodic piece. Or some of the more minimalist composers that are around today. Some of their music is used in film, like Ludovico Einaudi or Max Richter, things like that. When I would pick up the instrument, I would always write stuff. It's not identical to theirs, but it's within a similar realm, similar style. And a lot of composer friends of mine, they would be like, yeah, that sounds fine or whatever. It sounds like film music, and that would be
nice.
discouraged.
Yeah.
Well, so now circling back to the question I had for you is your openness to play, comfortably the electric guitar, be a studio musician, at the same time being a composer, but composing for the classical guitar, but borrowing from other styles like modern electric guitar
Mm.
styles or modern rock styles. Is this openness something that you've always had? Is this all like really a part of your general personality, or was this change and this move to India kind of a complete reset for you, and then you just started doing all of it together? That's what I'm wondering.
Ah, that's a good question. I would say it was always there. I was even like at Peabody, like I remember like arranging Mallorca for one of the recitals we had there. But I would say moving definitely helped peel the layers back, let's say, or I started getting much more active with that. In terms of electric guitar or acoustic guitar, I was always playing, so doing like a lot of session work kind of becomes a natural offshoot of that. But also just because like the music scene here is far busier. Like a film studio, if will churn out maybe 40 films in a given year here. A studio in the US might churn out 10. So it's just much faster paced industry. Um, so for that, you kind of need a skill set that a lot of classical guitarists don't have, which is good improvising skills, maybe slightly stronger sight reading, the ability to play with the metronome but not make it sound like you're perpetually warming up. So like that kind of stuff, there's definitely like a learning curve for it. But in terms of the composing and that, I've always been writing or arranging stuff, but I think the past maybe 3 years is when I really started taking it, uh, let's say seriously, or just dedicating. Like I definitely write more than I play. I definitely do not have a lot of practice time in my day. I don't sit around and practice for 4 hours, like I used to. I don't sit with the metronome on and do a ton of scales or stuff like that, say for maybe once or twice a month, if I'm being honest. um, Most of the time is I like tinkering with chords. I like coming up with maybe a rhythm and trying to set like a pattern or a piece to it, and that's uh, kind of the way that pieces like Masala Blues or Concentric Circles came out. Um, and it's interesting is that with each one they kind of get a subconscious influence from the surrounding, um, which is interesting for me, but also it's just enjoyable to be in the process of kind of like writing and seeing the dots on the paper, and making sounds. That sort of thing I've kind of fallen more in love with or more drawn to uh, than playing, if that makes sense. So if anything, I focus on maybe doing a couple nice concerts in a year, but definitely not 100 gigs or whatever I was doing all those years ago in California. Um, and then just like trying to write some nice new pieces, uh, yeah, and just kind of seeing where it goes.
So let me ask you the difference between San Francisco, California, and Chennai. What's the lifestyle like for a musician? And that's coming from all ends of the spectrum: the financial comfort side, um, the stress side, the happiness side. I mean, are people around you generally very happy with where they are there? Are they happy with the scene, or do they yearn to perhaps go somewhere else? I know there is a natural inclination to just go and live somewhere else too, just because it's
Yeah,
different and you want to
play
experience
guitar and
something
whatever.
different.
Yeah.
But I want to say, at the baseline, are people around you that are working musicians, specifically working with the classical guitar? How do they feel? How do they feel in Chennai? How do you feel?
For working and being specific kind of classical guitarist in Chennai, or at least where I am, I'm the only one. So I don't come into contact with really too many people, other than there's a few, very famous musicians I know that play classical guitar, were trained, but they're maybe a singer for the regional music industry.
Mm-hmm.
But and so in terms of pure like playing, practicing, getting repertoire out there, um, at least for the amount of time I have, there's not too many. Calcutta, Bangalore School of Music, and that sort of stuff. There's a lot of people, a lot of uh, students and students of mine and students of their schools that are now starting some schools and starting programs. So the cool thing would be the level of initiative you can take here, or risk that you can get in, is much greater, or much more in, like, say the person starting it up their favor. It'd be far more difficult to do that kind of thing in San Francisco or something like that and start your own music school kind of out of nowhere, and hire some other teachers or things like that. But the flip side is the stress factor is like incomparably higher here, let's say.
Okay.
So
And how
like we
come?
have to deal with. I don't even know where to start. So like I said, I enjoy it because for me it's been kind of like an adventure, but at the same time realize I've been pretty fortunate through it. Almost every person that I meet that has visited here from abroad has not been able to last a few weeks. I have a couple people that have came or coworkers that make it for a year or two, but most just they don't vibe with it. The temperature's too hot. The busyness. There's a lot of traffic. Blah blah blah. And I mean, we have to deal with a lot of infrastructure stuff. So like, if it rains a bit, the roads will flood. But we've had like torrential monsoons. Like we had one where the place I was staying, we got moated in, and there was around, depending on what street you're on, 5 to 10 feet of water. So like I've lived through like that, a lot of hurricanes and things. The power and stuff will get knocked out for a few days. You won't have food for like, I've been there, done that for a lot of things. And so the kind of day-to-day stress, not just the stress of kind of being a musician and working in the industry, I know is quite difficult. So yeah, it's a crazy place to be. You have to definitely have the right attitude or mindset to kind of roll with it.
Got it. And Matt, I really want to thank you for coming on. I had so many more questions, but there just wasn't enough time in this episode to ask. I hope you'll come on again soon, because it's been really fascinating asking you so many of these things about India, because I've never been. So I'm genuinely curious.
It's a great country to be in, to do music in, to travel, to see. Yeah, it's a really, really, really amazing place. It's really, really awesome. I'm very fortunate to have kind of found myself in the position to randomly make the decision to move over here, and that it seems to so far be working out in my favor, let's say. So yeah, thanks Peter, and thanks for taking the time.